stabbing the guy with forks and biting him in the ears, and he was a mad dog.
From Mad Dog Vachon biting ears in the ring, to Luna Vachon pulling a gun on a fellow wrestler, to Haku ending backstage fights with one hand, these forgotten WWE legends terrified everyone around them. And the most feared legend of all, he's the one almost nobody remembers today: Harley Race. Harley Race, an absolutely legendary 8-time NWA World Champion who successfully bridged the territorial system to WWF as the intimidating King Harley Race from 1986 to 1989, was a compact yet incredibly powerful 6'1", 240-pound brawler whose devastating left hook was whispered about in locker rooms like an ancient curse. Old-timers who shared the ring with him routinely called him the toughest man alive, and Race's reputation was backed up by more than just talk. He carried a concealed pistol for protection, survived multiple near-fatal accidents, including a horrific boating mishap that left him with an abnormally high pain threshold that bordered on superhuman, and maintained an aura of danger that permeated every locker room he entered. This wasn't a man who played at being tough. This was a man whose entire existence seemed to radiate genuine menace. Backstage at WWF events throughout the late 1980s, wrestlers instinctively avoided his piercing gaze, knowing full well that one wrong word or gesture could trigger an explosive reaction that no one wanted to experience firsthand. Even Andre the Giant, the unbeatable Colossus, outright feared him after witnessing race deck challengers in bars without even breaking a sweat, his movements economical and brutally efficient. The stories of Race's bar fights became legendary throughout the wrestling world, with one particularly memorable anecdote describing how Race once slugged a rowdy fan so devastatingly hard mid-match that the stunned promoter immediately halted the entire show, creating an awkward silence that hung over the arena like a dark cloud. He once spoke about how feared he was when he said this in a candid interview.
So I walked up into the dressing room area. It was like just a death silence fell over. And Terry was standing there talking to the two Funks sitting in the background. And they're looking at me like, oh my God, what's he here for?
Forgotten today amid flashier 1980s stars like the flamboyant Randy Savage and the cartoonish characters of that colorful era, Race's absolutely no-nonsense enforcer vibe made him the backstage sheriff that absolutely no one dared to challenge under any circumstances. His presence alone commanded instant respect, and his willingness to back up that respect with devastating violence made him a true legend whose reputation transcended championships and main events. If you thought Harley Race was scary with his calculated brutality, then you haven't heard about the feral, unpredictable intensity of our next forgotten legend who literally gnawed on his opponents. Mad Dog Vachon. At just 5'7" and 220 pounds, Maurice Mad Dog Vachon initially looked completely unassuming and even diminutive standing next to the giants of professional wrestling until he unleashed his razor-sharp fingernails and feral, blood-curdling snarls that made grown men recoil in genuine fear and confusion. His distinctive and absolutely terrifying style, which prominently featured biting and clawing that drew real blood from his opponents, predated the entire hardcore wrestling movement by several decades, making him a pioneer of violence that modern fans would eventually embrace. As a 5-time AWA champion who made sporadic but memorable appearances in the WWF during the 1980s, Vachon absolutely terrorized opponents with his unpredictable attacks that combined technical wrestling skill with savage brutality that seemed to come from somewhere deep and primal within his psyche. Despite his smaller stature compared to the behemoths populating wrestling rings throughout North America, Vachon had been pinning bigger men since he was a teenager in Quebec, dominating bar fights throughout the province where he would literally gnaw on challengers like a rabid, cornered animal protecting its territory. Pat Patterson, a respected WWF veteran who had seen it all during his decades in the business, called him tougher than anyone I've seen, recounting with visible discomfort how Vachon once commissioned and built a custom casket specifically designed to bury his rival Jerry Blackwell alive during a theatrical but genuinely disturbing match. Pure psychological warfare that echoed menacingly through every backstage area and made younger wrestlers question what they had gotten themselves into. Wrestlers like the legendary Ric Flair consciously steered clear of Mad Dog whenever possible, knowing instinctively that his crazy eyes signaled very real, unpredictable danger that went far beyond any scripted storyline or carefully choreographed angle. Don Morocco described how scary Mad Dog was when he said,
He decided to pick on the dog, which was probably the biggest mistake he'd made. The other guys would probably just knock him out. The last thing, and these are just stories I've heard. The last thing they pull in the dog out, he's got forks and everything. He's stabbing the guy with forks, and biting him in the ears, and he was a mad dog.
One particularly disturbing story that has been verified by multiple independent sources describes how Vachon once bit off a bar patron's ear in a Quebec dive bar during a heated altercation, eerily mirroring his savage in-ring brutality in a real-world setting that left witnesses traumatized and questioning what they had just witnessed. Overshadowed historically by his more famous brother Paul Vachon and modern hardcore psychos who followed in his violent footsteps, Mad Dog Vachon's genuinely unhinged intensity and animalistic fighting style made him an enduring locker room ghost story that veterans still whisper about decades later, with a mixture of fear and respect. But as terrifying as Mad Dog was with his animalistic attacks and psychological warfare, our next legend combined Olympic-level judo skills with street fighting fearlessness that made him absolutely unfuckable in every sense of the word. Bad News Brown. Alan Hodge, known professionally as Bad News Brown, during his memorable WWF tenure from 1988 to 1990, was an imposing 6'2", 260-pound judo Olympian whose perpetually street-smart scowl and compelling anti-hero promos masked a legitimate killer instinct that he had honed through years of competitive martial arts at the highest international level. As a bronze medalist in the 1976 Olympics, he possessed the highly technical ability to snap limbs with devastating arm bars and throws that could end careers in an instant, but it was his absolutely fearless demeanor and unwillingness to back down from anyone, regardless of their size, reputation, or political power within the company, that genuinely chilled spines throughout the wrestling industry and made him a figure of both respect and legitimate fear. In what became one of the most talked about and legendary backstage incidents of the entire era, Brown forced an apology from Andre the Giant after calling out what he perceived as a racist remark, staring down the 520-pound behemoth without even the slightest hint of fear or intimidation until Andre, recognizing genuine steel and unshakable resolve in Brown's eyes, actually backed off and offered a grudging apology. Backstage throughout his WWF run, Brown was universally considered unwithable by his peers, a term that wrestling insiders reserved exclusively for only the absolute toughest individuals who had proven themselves in real confrontations. JBL, himself no stranger to real fights and legitimate toughness, recalled with evident respect how Brown once slapped Big Van Vader, a 400-pound beast of a man known internationally for his own legitimate toughness and willingness to fight, without even flinching or showing any concern for potential retaliation, while Brown's judo throws in hotel scuffles routinely left painful bruises that lasted for weeks and served as reminders not to cross him. Harry Smith spoke about Bad News' feud with Andre when he said,
I've heard that from a few people, and then I heard that they talked about it years later. I think when they were both in WWF, Andre and Bad News kind of buried the hatchet, and he apologized. And but I wouldn't know. I never asked Bad News about that, no.
Forgotten today amid Royal Rumble main events that he memorably stole with his unpredictable performances and anti-hero charisma, Bad News Brown's unique and powerful blend of Olympic-caliber athletic precision and absolute zero tolerance for any form of disrespect made even established champions like Randy Savage whisper cautionary warnings to younger wrestlers about the dangers of crossing him or getting on his bad side, while Bad News commanded fear and respect through martial arts mastery and fearless confrontation. Our next forgotten legend used devastating palm strikes and unwavering loyalty to become the locker room's most feared enforcer and protector. Rick Rude. The 6'3", 252-pound Rick Ravishing Rude was a magnificently sculpted Adonis in the ring during his WWF tenure from 1987 to 1990, with his gyrating hips and arrogant persona making him one of the most memorable heels of the era who drew massive heat from audiences everywhere. However, backstage in the private world that fans never saw, his bouncer roots and extensive street fighting experience transformed him into a palm-striking machine who had reportedly knocked out dozens of rowdy wrestlers with devastatingly precise open-hand shots that dropped men cold before they even realized what had hit them. A former arm wrestling champion who possessed extraordinary upper body strength that allowed him to dominate opponents in tests of pure power, Rude protected undercard talent like a mafia enforcer, establishing himself as the guy who maintained order and defended those who couldn't defend themselves against bullies and troublemakers. Perhaps most famously in wrestling lore, after the controversial and emotionally charged 1997 Montreal Montreal screwjob that saw Bret Hart legitimately betrayed by Vince McMahon in front of his home country, Rude sat vigilant watch in Hart's locker room for hours, his imposing presence and steely gaze daring absolutely anyone to approach or cause further trouble during an incredibly tense and volatile situation. Peers like Jake "the Snake" Roberts, himself a tough customer with a reputation for being dangerous, openly admitted that Rude's mean streak was absolutely no act. It was genuine menace barely contained beneath the surface of his muscular, cocky exterior. One particularly memorable tale that has circulated through wrestling circles for years describes how Rude flattened a WCW invader with a single, perfectly placed palm strike to the temple during a backstage confrontation, earning approving nods from none other than Harley Race himself, the ultimate judge of toughness and legitimacy in the wrestling world, eclipsed historically by his ravishing sex symbol gimmick that focused on his physical appearance and his tragically early death at just 40 years old. Rudy's quiet but palpable menace made him the guy you fervently prayed never got genuinely pissed off at you under any circumstances. His loyalty to friends and those he deemed worthy was legendary throughout the business, but so was his willingness to use swift and brutal violence when he deemed it necessary to protect or punish. If Rick Rude's calculated violence and protective nature scared you, wait until you hear about the bone-crushing grip strength of our next forgotten legend who could literally crush pliers with his bare hands. Danny Hodge. A 5'11" wrestling savant who made sporadic appearances in the WWF during the 1970s and 1980s, but was primarily known for his legendary NWA work, Danny Hodge was an NCAA champion and Golden Gloves boxer whose bare hands could perform feats that seemed physically impossible to anyone who witnessed them. He could crush pliers or bend steel bars with just his grip strength alone, mind-boggling displays of raw power that left WWF rookies simultaneously awestruck and absolutely terrified of what those hands could do to human flesh and bone. Terry Funk, himself a legitimate tough guy and wrestling legend who had faced the toughest men in the world, called Hodge unbeatable in his prime, recounting with genuine reverence and amazement how Hodge miraculously escaped a catastrophic car wreck by swimming across a flooded river with a broken neck, then incredibly submitted giants like Great Scott in the ring without even working up a sweat or showing any signs of discomfort from his injuries. Greg Valentine spoke about Danny's insane grip, saying,
Danny Hodge had such a grip. I wanted to feel the grip. And Danny was a nice guy. And I said, Danny, will you grab my, because I got big forearms. I wanted him to grab my forearm with a grip. And he put the grip on me and I went right down on my knees. It was like nothing I've ever felt before in my life.
In WWF house shows throughout his various appearances spanning multiple decades, veteran wrestlers like Bob Backlund, himself an incredibly strong and skilled grappler, consciously avoided shoot matches with Hodge whenever possible, knowing instinctively that his devastating hooks and holds could cause permanent injury or even maim opponents if he chose to apply them with full force. Ole Anderson, a tough-as-nails member of the legendary Anderson family known for their hardness, once colorfully and memorably stated that he'd rather face an angry, wild grizzly bear in the woods than get into a legitimate grappling match with Danny Hodge. Largely forgotten outside of the most hardcore wrestling fans who study the sport's technical history and legitimate fighters, Hodge's old-school legitimacy and superhuman physical abilities made him a mythologized boogeyman whose reputation and legend grew with each passing year. While Hodge could crush you with his hands, our next legend could systematically break your bones with surgical precision using techniques designed to maim. Thesz. The 6'2", 225-pound Thesz, a six-time world champion who made various cameos in the WWF from the 1950s through the 1980s across multiple decades of wrestling evolution, was an absolute master of hooking techniques that he learned meticulously from his legendary mentor Ed Strangler Lewis. Holds and submissions that were specifically designed not just to make opponents submit and tap out, but to actually snap bones and permanently damage joints if the practitioner chose to apply them with full, devastating force. Throughout his territorial bouts that spanned decades across North America and internationally, Thesz broke arms and shoulders with clinical efficiency and cold calculation, earning a fearsome reputation as the meanest grappler who would deliberately target cocky young hotshots with surgical brutality designed to humble them and teach them respect for the business and its traditions. Remarkably, and almost unbelievably, even in his 70s when most men would be retired and sedentary, Thesz would spar with young WWF trainees at various training facilities around the country, and these brave or foolish young men routinely left the sessions limping and nursing injuries from the elderly master's holds that still retained their devastating power despite his advanced age. Bruno Sammartino, himself no slouch and one of wrestling's toughest champions who had faced the best in the world, admitted with genuine trepidation that Thesz's vice-like grip was pure terror to experience firsthand, describing the sensation of being caught in one of his submissions as feeling like your bones were being slowly crushed in a medieval torture device. Lou, who was a three-time NWA heavyweight champion, was trained by George Tragos, who taught him great moves like the grip lock. He spoke about how he was being trained by Tragos during live matches, where he spoke in a candid interview describing how his trainer crippled a man.
And he wanted me to see something, because he was teaching me these moves. At the same time, he wanted to see how it really works. And he faked him out and finally got exactly what he wanted, got a double wrist lock on him, and took him over with it a couple of times. And the rotator, I heard that when the tendons snap, you can hear them a long ways away. And he was crippled.
Forgotten in WWE's Hulkamania era that emphasized spectacle and entertainment over technical prowess, Lou Thesz's clinical sadism and technical mastery influenced legendary technical wrestlers from Bret Hart to Kurt Angle, but none of them ever matched the quiet, menacing dread that Thesz could inspire with just a look. If Thesz could break you technically with precision holds, our next legend could break you with raw, superhuman power that defied belief. Bob Backlund. The clean-cut, perpetually smiling 6'1", 233-pound Bob Backlund was a two-time NCAA All-American wrestler whose impressive and almost unbelievable 500-pound bench press allowed him to one-arm lift Hulk Hogan like a rag doll, a feat that seemed absolutely impossible given Hogan's own considerable size and strength. During his initial WWF Championship run from 1978 to 1985 and his surprising comeback from 1992 to 1993, Backlund's signature cross-face chicken wing submission hold induced screams of genuine agony that echoed ominously through backstage areas, making everyone acutely aware of its devastating effectiveness and the very real danger of being caught in its grip. Demolition Axe spoke about how strong Bob Backlund was when he said,
"Bob was one of the strongest guys I ever got in the ring with. I mean, he lifted me up with one arm.
No, oh, so you did
Shoulder height
Oh.
from an arm bar on his leg, a scissors hold, and I was amazed. But Bob was a good guy. I think he was misunderstood.
In his remarkable return during his 40s, when many assumed he was past his physical prime, Backlund systematically tore through young lions who foolishly underestimated the older competitor, leaving legendary tough guys like Iron Sheik tapping frantically in dark matches, their faces contorted in genuine pain and fear. Peers like Sergeant Slaughter, himself known throughout the industry for his intense training methods and military-inspired toughness, called Backlund pound for pound the strongest wrestler in the entire business, with numerous stories circulating through locker rooms about him ragdolling 300-pound behemoths during private workout sessions as if they were children or lightweight dummies. Overshadowed historically by his wholesome, perpetually cheerful, all-American babyface run that defined much of his career and made him a fan favorite, Bob Backlund's deceptively wholesome and friendly exterior hid a legitimate vice and superhuman strength that absolutely terrified heels who had to sell for him, knowing that one wrong move could result in very real injury. While Backlund scared people with pure power, our next legend combined martial arts mastery with silent intensity to become an enforcer. Steve Blackman. A 6'2", 250-pound martial arts black belt in multiple disciplines, including Shotokan karate and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, who competed in the WWF from 1992 to 2002, Steve the Lethal Weapon Blackman was Vince McMahon's designated Haku duty guy, meaning he was specifically sent to handle WCW, raids or dangerous bar brawls with devastating headbutts and precise elbow strikes that dropped giants without hesitation or mercy. His calm, methodical fighting style made him even more terrifying than more explosive fighters, as opponents never knew when the switch would flip from calm to violent. The infamous incident where JBL once provoked Blackman into a backstage scrap has become legendary in wrestling circles and is still discussed today, with JBL later apologizing profusely after receiving a devastating knee to the gut that left him gasping and immediately re-evaluating his decision-making and choice of targets. During the comedic 24/7 championship era, Blackman would stiff the comedy jobbers chasing him so hard with legitimate legitimate strikes that several of them actually quit pursuing him entirely, preferring to chase easier and safer targets. Forgotten today as just the silent ninja with glow sticks and martial arts weapons, Steve Blackman's calm but absolutely lethal demeanor made him the locker room's unspoken enforcer, a role he fulfilled so effectively that even legitimate tough guys like Ken Shamrock, himself an MMA pioneer, treated him with considerable respect. If Steve Blackman was intimidating as a man, our next legend broke all the rules by being a woman who could beat up men twice her size. Luna Vachon. Gertrude Vachon, who performed as the 5'7" Luna with her gravelly voice, distinctive mohawk, and visibly scarred psyche during her WWF tenures from 1993 to 1997 and a brief return in 2000, was a second-generation grappler who initially debuted as a valet for Shawn Michaels but quickly turned heads by stiffing men twice her size, with legitimate strikes that left them wincing in pain. Her theatrical mohawk and blood-curdling screams masked a genuine toughness that intimidated even Bam Bam Bigelow, a 400-pound powerhouse. She once suplexed a male trainee through a table in anger, earning whispers of "Don't mess with Luna" throughout backstage areas. Grangel spoke about Luna's dark side, saying,
I didn't tell him a lot of things. I didn't tell him about her pulling a gun and shooting it on me or threatening it. I did all that because I guess I didn't think of it because...
Sable, one of the biggest female stars of the Attitude Era, notably avoided Luna backstage after a promo went wrong, understanding that Luna's rage wasn't part of any script. A trailblazer forgotten in the glamorous diva spotlights of later years, Luna Vachon's unfiltered rage and genuine toughness broke gender barriers in wrestling, and occasionally broke jaws of those who underestimated her. Her volatile personality extended beyond the ring into her personal life, creating an aura of unpredictability that made everyone cautious around her. If Luna's unpredictable violence was scary, our final forgotten legend took intimidation to another level with a prison yard menace that wasn't an act. Nails. Kevin Wachholtz, the 7-foot, 300-pound Nails, was an ex-convict dressed in an orange prison jumpsuit whose guttural roars and claw holds evoked real prison yard menace during his brief but memorable Big Boss Man feud in 1992. Backstage, his actual parole status fueled genuine paranoia among the roster. He reportedly threatened Vince McMahon himself over booking disputes, leading to his firing, and wrestlers like Sid Vicious steering clear, fearing his crazy convict persona wasn't all an act. His imposing size combined with his unpredictable behavior created an atmosphere of tension whenever he was present. Ultra forgotten after just 1 year in the company, Nails' raw volatility and genuine menace made him a cautionary tale of untamed fury that the WWF couldn't control or contain. His willingness to confront even Vince McMahon demonstrated either incredible courage or reckless disregard for consequences, making him someone no one wanted to cross during his brief tenure. These legends remind us that WWE's golden eras thrived on real grit, not just choreographed spots and scripted drama. While names like Haku or Vader get the headlines for toughness in modern discussions, these overlooked figures' shadows loomed largest in the minds of those who shared the locker room with them day in and day out. Their legacies live on in the whispered stories, the shoot interviews, and the oral histories that keep wrestling's most terrifying truths alive for future generations. If you enjoyed this video, click on any of the cards on your screen for more exciting videos.